hesitate to have a conversation with the coach or the athletic director, but would never do the same with the teacher or the principal, right? We'd be blowing up their email right away, right? So stop being so damn polite. Make it weird, make it awkward, and ruffle whatever feathers we have to until we don't have to, right? And certainly, yes, we teach these student athletes to advocate for themselves, but let's move the needle until they don't have to advocate because they're safe and they're healthy in their sport.
And somebody made the point in that conversation that the hesitation on the part of the adult who wants to step in and advocate is, well, what if that makes it less likely for my athlete to be successful in that setting? And that you should also consider at some point that means that that athletic opportunity isn't matching your values for that student athlete, and that sometimes this isn't the right place is the right answer. But that's hard too, because then the awkward conversations we're afraid of are with our student athlete. So as the adult at home, for me to say, hey, I'm hearing all the stories that you're telling me about the language that's being used and the pitch that it's being screamed at you and the insults that you're hearing, and I'm going to step in, and the student is saying, whoa, wait, I'm gonna take or even saying to that student, I don't think this is the right setting for you. This doesn't sound safe where you're at, and I want you to, or I'm gonna pull you away from this situation. And we get a lot of pressure from the student athlete, especially if their identity and their worth is entirely knit to that team. So can we go back to something that's come up in every single session about identity? What are things from all the different angles we have on an athlete? What are things we can actually do? What are strategies we can use to force the point to get kids to develop identities that are diversified? How do we get them to diversify not just their schedule, but actually how they see themselves?
Yeah, I guess my thought about that is that starts at home. I think so often we have this intervention mentality, and I think we have to be more preventative. And mental health has been a problem historically, right? It's like we only go see someone when we're having the panic attack as opposed to how do we prevent them from happening, right? So I think in many ways we have to adopt preventative ideas as it relates to the mental wellness of a student athlete. So in many ways at home, right, and with your family and your caregivers and whatnot, it's fostering those different identities. Athletes know they have different identities, but they have to be fostered, right? So I'm not just an athlete. Again, student-athlete well-being, not athlete-student well-being, right? So it's really important that we acknowledge that they are a student first, then an athlete. But being a student implies you're also a son, daughter, you're also a sibling, you're also a whole lot of other things. And I think that with young people in particular need people in their lives to reinforce those other facets of the identity, which really speaks to not only values and speaks to psychological readiness, but my favorite term is emotional regulation. Like, how are we gonna teach them how to have emotional regulation? You gotta navigate emotions, let's be honest. The other thing that is not talked about a whole lot, to your point about politeness, is most people avoid emotions. Right? We know you're salty, right? But you don't talk about it. So there's negative emotions that are inherent to any sport, and the key is acknowledging that that's the case. And coaches need to own that too. And to say, I'm feeling a certain type of way today as well, and need to communicate that to their athletes. So another sidebar, but yeah.
But I think that it's true that those conversations can start at home, but the hardest place probably to get young person to diversify their identity is when they're being guided by their coach, because their relationship with their coach is around their athleticism, right? And their participation in that or their attitude towards that. Are there things that coaches could do in their language to recognize and honor the other parts of those people's identity?
Again, since this is a solutions panel, Dr. G, I think that, again, this is pie in the sky, but this is something I talk a lot about. In fact, with our TrueSport.
Aim high, let's do it.
Right? So even with the TrueSport lessons, I say this because we talk a lot about coaches and what coaches need to do as well. So one thing that I'm really biased toward is coaches adopting, even in their team mantras, things that speak to psychological readiness, right? Like, so things that speak on the front level from a cultural perspective of embedding in the outset in the program, right? Like, here's the things we do as a team. Here's the things we do to regulate emotions as a team. Here's the things I want you to do outside of your sport. I want you to go have fun and do other things outside of this. I think in one of the panels they talked about I think Pipe said it. He said, like, we stopped doing football, we did other things, something. I'm paraphrasing to that effect. But it's literally doing other things that are not specific to the sport. You have to be well-rounded, else you're going to be emotionally dysregulated, and you're not going to get an optimal performance anyway.
In a little while, when we turn to you, we'd love not only questions, but also strategies. You are all experts in this, and you may be hearing things and saying, oh, hey, we do that in a particular way. Or I just had a thought that we might operationalize. So please be ready to share with us your brilliance and your strategies as well. Can you talk a little bit, Dr. Kirby, about what educators or policymakers could be doing to help students diversify their identity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from an educator perspective, especially because most of the time I spend in the classroom, is, being a little bit of that trusted, tough love person a little bit, right? Because especially if you see the athlete and they're all in for their sport, right? Especially in my setting in college. They're all in and they're cool and they're loving it. They're having the time of their life. They're having a great journey in sport, but they're like, whatevs for this class, right? And so really taking the time to say hey, let's meet, reaching out. And I've done this with a few of our student athletes on campus, and I'm like, hey, I get it. You're in your sport, you love it, you're doing great. But I also know in this space, in this academic space, that you also need, you're not showing up to the potential I know you have, So let's talk about that. And I really value that approach versus what I've seen other people in education do say, they get annoyed by the student-athlete dichotomy. And so they're really hard on the student-athletes and don't want to give them a lot of grace and how to make up a test or how to make up an assignment. So instead, building the relationship with them and helping them just like we talk about with athletic identity, really helping them explore what's their why, right? So I know why you love sport and why you play it, but what are your other loves, right? Because that's key to identity, is love and enjoyment. Yeah. So what are your other loves, or what were they before you went all in on your sport?
From the adult at home standpoint, I think that we are conditioned to believe as grown-ups that kids aren't really going to want to talk to us that much. I take care of newly delivered babies in my practice. In the hospital, I see every baby in my practice within 24 hours of them being born. And I have to tell you, it is pretty much every single time I'm in a room seeing a newborn and they have someone else with them, like a guest or someone who's coming to visit that baby just socially, the number of times that I hear, oh, just wait till he's a teenager. Oh, I was like, child's not 13 hours old. And we are flash forwarding to a time where there will be disconnection, and we are saying there will be disconnection, there will be disengagement. And often that's not the case. But because I think that we are nervous that we won't be able to land on something that feels to us like connection and like we are really having a meaningful relationship, we develop patterns that are easier. I can easily engage my kid in talking about their sport. I can always ask how the game went or how practice went. And it's easier to ask about facts than feelings, to your point. So I'm gonna ask about how many threes did you make? Or what was your time for this or that? Or what did the coach have you do? Instead of asking really open-ended, truly, actually non-judgmental questions. Because our kids will hear often judgment in our words, but being as blank slate as we can. Tell me about what happened. Tell me a story about, even if you want to go to a sport, tell me a story about practice. What was a challenge today? What was a compliment somebody paid you? What was a kindness that you did or somebody did for you? And then listen and try really hard not to have an opinion about that out loud. Sometimes our faces are so loud to our kids. And so trying to have a quiet face and listen to learn and to be really curious and say things like, tell me more. And then what? And how did that land with you? And in that, showing that we appreciate them. But that diversity of identity means we can't always lean on that one thing we both know they like. We have to ask about other aspects of their identity. When they hear us talking about our kids to other people, which is, by the way, the only time they are always listening to us, is when we are talking about them but not to them. Mine just popped up right then, and it's like, oh, what, about me? Yeah. That's when we have to make sure that we're not always identifying them by their achievements and talking about their athleticism or their academics and just talking about their output and their achievement like they're our top salesman at our company, and we're talking about our salesman of the year, and we only care about their sales. We have to talk about, and I want to encourage Dr. Stanek that in America, we don't only talk about our kids' sports or their achievements. We do say things like, oh yeah, I've met your friend, what a good kid, or I liked how helpful they were, or their curiosity or whatever. We do talk about those things, but the power of that language and asking our kids about their emotions and not just their achievements, and again, in as non-judgmental a way as we can, I think is really helpful. I feel you wanted to say something.
Well, just because it goes back to what I said earlier, right?
Obviously,
it's this idea that we've been brainwashed to some degree to, I should probably say socialized, but really brainwashed, to have this outcome-based mentality, right? And it's something in Western society that permeates everything we do. It's all based on outcome and performance. I mean, think about it. I have 2 daughters. What do you think the first thing someone's gonna ask me when I say I have an 18-year-old?
What you doing?
Where do you go to school?
Yeah.
Right? What if she's not in school? Right? Am I a failure? No, right? So I think it's this idea that there's many facets to our identity, and we got to learn to socialize our children to know that there are many parts to them. All of them are unique, and we value every single one of them, right? We can't have a performance-based mentality. So it really starts with us asking the right questions, like you said, and having non-judgmental stances when we do so.
But it's really hard because we have our own goals. Yep. For kids, and we do feel like we can see. When I was talking last night with the athletes that I was lucky enough to speak to in front of you this morning, we were talking about how there's research that shows that when a teen goes to an adult with a problem, and the research asked them multiple choice, when you go to an adult with a problem, are you looking for empathy, advice, intervention, or combination? 85% of the students said empathy only. Super annoying. 90% of adults, when they go to an adult with they said empathy only. Even more annoying. Why are you coming to me if you don't want me to tell you what to do? But in that setting, if we can listen to give them a safe space to express what they're feeling and genuinely give us their feelings, they're making themselves safer. They won't have to count on us to always make them safe. They're making themselves safer. We want to talk about how to make sure that we catch the yellow flags that we see in students before something dangerous happens to them. We talked earlier about the difference between discomfort and danger and teaching students to recognize where's the red line between those. And it's really important for us to notice yellow flags and be able to uncomfortably say, hey, your words said okay, but your face and body language says anything but. Please tell me more. Yep. But we also really very much, when we talk about mental well-being, we want to know about prevention. So can you each talk a little bit about something we could change in the next semester in school settings, whether we're in a middle school or college or anything, something we could change that would build more prevention in a really practical way for all of our teams?
I would definitely start with education, right? So education in any of the topics we've touched on today, and especially those in psychological readiness, mental wellness, or just all the dimensions of wellness, right? So just teaching the basics like Wellness 101. So physical, social, emotional, spiritual, social wellness to our athletes is huge. Something I hear over and over again in the college setting specifically is that, college counseling centers have really long wait lists, and they're both underfunded and understaffed, right? Well, the truth of the matter is, in our college campuses and in every single community in the United States, we will never have enough mental health professionals if we keep relying on crisis care, period. So we have to start with education at the youngest ages possible to build the skills for prevention. And that goes for any type of health behavior across the board for our communities.
I think the other thing to add to that is I think we need to create a safe space, not only to have these conversations, but to talk about, I'm very biased when it comes to emotions, so I would say to normalize emotional conversations. Like, I can't tell you enough. We talk about mental toughness. It's a term I use a lot as well, but honestly, many people view mental toughness as emotional avoidance. That's not what mental toughness is, right? It's being resilient, it's being emotionally regulated. So we got to remove these semantics that we like to use to say, oh, mental toughness is pretending nothing's wrong. Well, that's going to backfire paradoxically and make something wrong, right? So I would say, along with the education, is talking about what are the function of emotions? Why do you have anger, right? Why do you have sadness? Why do you have anxiety? Why do you have disgust, an emotion no one talks about? But nonetheless, these are all emotions that we're all going to experience in our lives, but also in sport, right? So I think that if we can have those conversations early, at every single level, that's going to create a safe space for us to have honest dialogues about when we experience those emotions and how to adaptively respond to them. Not only from a coaching standpoint, but from a student-athlete standpoint and a parental standpoint.
I have the opportunity once a year to go to the U.S. Army War College in Pennsylvania and speak to, they run a course for all 5 branches of the military actually, where people are about to level up from second in command to command of a base, a submarine, a carrier group, whatever. And they go there to do a full year that is basically a master's in leadership. And they give me 1 hour to talk about resilience. And these are people that are experts on resilience in almost every measure. But I showed a slide, the first time I ever did it, I showed a slide that was 2 pictures side by side. And one was 3 young soldiers in urban fatigues, in helmets, weapons at the ready, stone-faced, for sure. And obviously on patrol in a tense situation. And the other was a 6-year-old child in a red windbreaker, bike helmet, in the rain with pedaling a 2-wheeler, sobbing. And I said to all of, as it happens, gentlemen who were there, I said, one of these is an example of stoicism, and one is an example of resilience. Can you tell me what you think? And the highest ranking person in the room raised his hand, and he said, the boys in fatigues are stoic, the kid on the bike is resilient. And I said, I agree with you. Will you explain why you feel that way? And he said, well, all that the 3 guys in fatigues are doing is not showing and stuffing down and trying not to feel. That's where they're putting all their energy. The kid on the bike is crying and riding the bike. And resilience requires emotion. Yep. And that difference between knowing how to recognize and use your emotion and both, right? And move towards some possible solution to your situation, that's one of the most valuable lessons that sport can teach. One of the things that I did hear people talking about in the breaks is something that research calls time hunger. It's this scarcity view that we all have of our time with students is, well, if I'm gonna do that, what am I not gonna do that I'm already doing? What would I replace? I would really love to encourage people to think, as you start to think about solutions, think, what are you already doing that teaches some of these values, but you're not naming them? Could be a little bit more intentional, because we get what we name with kids. There's some great research that shows when we say to and about an elementary schooler who has a limited palate in what they eat, if we talk about them as a picky eater, their palate will become more and more and more limited. If we talk about them as a brave eater, I'm not a brave eater because I've never met a food I didn't like. I don't have to be brave. There's nothing scary about eating to me, right? But for kids who do find a lot of foods that texture, taste, whatever they don't like, they have to be a really brave eater. So when we talk about them as adventurous or brave eaters because they try anything at all that isn't mac and cheese, it turns out their palate widens. And so that idea of being intentional in our speech and saying, not just doing an activity where maybe some emotions get mentioned, but we say, oh, well, emotions always come up when I do that activity. So we're gonna mention that this activity is about perseverance and emotional expression, not just about perseverance. That doesn't really take up any more time. So are there places where you're already teaching some of these things, but you were thinking about it like the zucchini and the chocolate chip zucchini bread, where you tell your kids it's just chocolate chip bread, but there's actually zucchini in there, right? To hide the vegetables. What if we name the vegetables? And also, what if they're not vegetables? What if they're a part of what makes it valuable and interesting? Are there places that you can think of, and then I'm turning to all of you, so think about it for a minute, please. Are there places where you are or could be seeing these things happen already? We're just maybe not labeling it in as helpful a way as we could.
I think from the educator perspective, you do a lot with like classroom rules, classroom culture, classroom expectations, right? And really, even if there's things you're doing intentionally, say for like social emotional learning outcomes, but being sure that we're naming them specifically. And I even do that in the college classroom. So I firmly believe, even as a college professor, that it is far more important the relationships I develop with each student and the learning community I support to be safe and inclusive than any lecture slide, any chapter I assign to read, any content. It doesn't even matter the topic. Way more important. And that's exactly what I tell students on the first day, is I articulate very much my intention, my teaching philosophy, my goals. I teach in health promotion, so I tell them I couldn't get up each day and live with myself teaching health promotion if I also didn't think it was important to role model it, and within that to help support their balance and their stress management. And so I tell them, like, I'm not gonna be a hard ass here just because I can be, so like I have an open door, we have open communication. When life comes up, we're gonna work through it together, but that doesn't mean you can't do your assignments for 10 weeks and then figure out how to fix it during finals. And so I'm just completely clear about my teaching philosophy and how it applies to them and how it's a learning journey together.
What about you, Dr. G? What would you say?
Yeah.
I would say that there are so many opportunities, I think, to look at something you were going to do anyway and see what else does this do. I work with a games creator in the toys and games space. And this is a games creator, some of you guys might know them. The company's Think Fun, and they make games like Rush Hour and Safari. They make personal, usually single-player games that help people to advance their problem-solving skills. And they, for 10 or 12 years, they said to all their possible customers, we teach STEM skills, because that's what they perceived that parents wanted, right? Their kids to be more academically successful. And they came to me about 8 months ago, and they said, so we researched, and all of our customers, especially parents and teachers, they're not so worried about STEM skills, they're really worried about their students' mental health. And we're not totally sure what to do because we are totally predicated on STEM skills. Now, they did set their creators to thinking about games that would build MESH skills, mental, emotional, and social health. That was a term I brought to them that I didn't create, right? But I showed them that this existed and the research why we need it. And then I said, but hang on, let's look at the games you already have that are teaching spatial relations and all of those cool STEM skills. Did you know that they're also teaching kids perseverance? They're also teaching kids how to handle progressive challenges, things getting harder over the course of things, trying to level up. Could they also be teaching how to know how and when to ask for help from their adult? So they actually created slip sheets to go into their games, just like one of those shiny pieces of paper when you open up the game and there's a bunch of information that are for the adult to say, here are questions you can ask your child about their play with our game that will build their mental, emotional, and social health skills. They will, because it takes a couple of years, come out with some games that are really focused on building MESH skills. But if they teach people to use their games right, they could already be teaching MESH skills. And what I want to say is, what are you doing that is already teaching some of the skills we heard about today, but you haven't been as much in the mindset to name that thing because it wasn't your top priority? Are there other things that you are also doing? It does not have to be an either or, it can be an and both. Our students are excellent at and both. Really, we know that Gen Z, and I think we're gonna end up calling them Alpha Gen, that's looking like what the next group who are under 8th grade may be called, but we haven't really settled on that yet in the literature. They don't compartmentalize. Like, I'm a Gen Xer. We compartmentalize. You want me to do that for work, but it's 5:03 p.m., right? I couldn't possibly call to reconfirm my dentist appointment because it's during business hours. Yeah, millennials and Gen Z, they're like, I'm a three-dimensional person all the time. I look at all the, and that's a real advantage in this way. It does not have to be obviously gonna make me a better cross-country runner for my cross-country coach to be spending time on this. It's going to make me better. And I'm not only here in this hour and a half for the cross-country running, I'm everywhere all the time for everything. And I think that that's the thing that makes me feel better, that we're not asking you to add to your to-do list. We're asking you to shift your lens, just like 9 degrees and look a little differently at your own expertise and everything you're already doing. Which causes me to throw to you. Do you have any questions that you'd like us to address in particular? Any strategies you heard of that you're having a difficult time operationalizing in your mind? Or did you hear any ideas today that you are already operationalizing or you know how you want to? And anybody online, we would love to hear from you as well. Yes, please. Can we have a microphone? Thank you. Right here on the aisle, 3 tables up. Perfect.
So there's a few people from my school that we've kind of been talking as we go, and I think one thing we've noticed that we're doing well of starting is starting the intentional space. So we talked about, so I have my head football coach and then one of our school counselors here with me, that we started a athlete pantry, essentially. Come grab a granola bar after practice, before practice, some noodles, some cereal, something like that. And we've learned that it's gives kids excuses to be around us. So that way when they think they need help, it's not I have to go talk to so-and-so for help. I'm going to coach for a granola bar. If I happen to talk about my day, it's kind of gives them that excuse. And then I think I'm an athletic trainer at my school, and I've learned to use the time, because I don't get a lot of one-on-one with my kids like sometimes coaches do. Learn to take athlete conversations out of when we're doing rehab, when we're doing tapes, out of the initial, this is what you're gonna do for practice today. It's what's your highlight of your day? We have a lot of is a hot dog a sandwich debates kind of thing in my room.
Is a hot dog a sandwich? You can get a lot of information out of the conversation.
Yeah. I've learned that it then gives kids oh, I want to go talk to Ms. Bree about this. And then I think it makes it easier pathway to start talking about the harder things.
So an idea, if you're going to take your athlete's pantry and name it out loud, you might put up a poster that said, come feed your body and your mind. And in that way, name what you're doing and make it more obvious, because once students realize the thing behind the thing, then they have to decide, is it cute that you hit it a little bit, or is it because it's shameful? And so if we can name it right out loud, be like, come on over, we have food for your stomach, and we have words for your brain, and or we have listening ears for your brain, or whatever the age of the student you're dealing with. Or even better, have them design the poster to say why it's valuable. And I think that is really an excellent strategy for us to remember, that give them a hook, a reason to come over for people who are maybe less sure that it's the right place to be or that they even need it, but free food. All right, I'll try it. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, we got a couple of people up here.
So I work with a nonprofit that implements mental wellness resources into a hockey program in Moorhead, Minnesota, which is pretty well known for its Moorhead hockey community. It's a third generational hockey community. A couple different people have gone pro. So within this, we are trying to implement through kindergartners through seniors in high school, the foundational skills to have the mental wellness that they need both on and off the ice. And so this is like a proactive approach that we have tried to implement. But I think, well, one thing I know that we're struggling with is the parental feedback. And so what I mean by that is that not all parents are buying in. I mean, some are head in, like jumping in, cannonball, all ready to go. And some are like, absolutely not. Like, this isn't what I signed my kid up for. This isn't why I bring them to the hockey rink. And so kind of talking about like, what did you take out so that we could put in? We have partnered with a dryland coach, so their off-ice training.
Oh, what coach, sorry?
Dryland coach.
Dryland coach.
Yeah, so the off-ice strength and conditioning coach has allotted us 15 minutes a week because he only gets 30 minutes a week with them. So he's allowed, us the 15, and we come in and we then give them the resources and talk with them with our professionally trained psychologists on staff. And so with this, how do we make it so that it's not buzzwords, and it's not like these, we're just trying to do something that's going to be like, not problematic, but we see these problems and we don't want to use the words as like an attention getter, but rather as a solution. So how do we get the parental buy-in from those who are not interested, is I guess if you have any solutions, I'm all ears.
Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's
We all do.
Yeah, one of the hardest spaces, I think, and that's one of the hardest questions I get across settings is like, what do you do with the parents? And not the supportive parents, but the parents that are not into it. I think there's a couple of things in some spaces I've seen, like what we have here today, the term mental wellness, which sometimes sits with people more than the mental health term because it's been destigmatized for so long, so steeply. So like, building mental strength, you could certainly pull research and data of, why it's an evidence-based practice that might float their boat. I also think having coach and administrator buy-in is really important, and if that can be articulated as a known value of what you are signing up for, because it's part of the mission and values of the club, then that could maybe potentially be helpful as well.
How many parents, are the parents involved at all? And do they come in anything? Do they come in?
Can you?
I think,
Yeah,
yes.
go ahead.
Because otherwise people online are just guessing what you're saying.
Yes, sorry about that. So we have some parents who are some of the coaches. So it's about 600 athletes in the youth program. And we have some parents who are coaches. We have some parents who are heavily involved in just like volunteering with whatever that looks like for them. But we do have a meeting at the beginning of the year where I do speak on behalf of our nonprofit and say, like, here's what we're going to be doing. Here's what it's going to look like. I mean, it's a 3-minute spiel that at the parent-kid like preseason meeting that nobody wants to be at anyway. So I don't really know how much attention I have.
Right.
But they do kind of know, and it is new, so it's the 3rd year that it's being implemented. So, we're starting from the ground up here. But there is like definitely some buy-in. We have different events throughout the year, whether that's the 2 hockey tournaments and then we have a golf tournament in the summer. So it's not just hockey focused. And we try to make it more of a parent-kid thing so that they are able to have those conversations with an adult in their life. So that's like why we just want to see how can we hit more of our kids with more parent buy-in, I guess is the...
Yeah, parent buy-in is obviously tough. Like, we all know this already, and if other people have ideas, certainly chime in. But I guess one thought I have is always like the planting the seed by like giving them some bait, so to speak, and then you kind of reel it in. And what I'm saying by that is if you have the opportunity to touch parents, it's here's how you can help us help your kid, come find out how, right? And have a common language that the athletes know about, right? That they can share at home, but like, again, not all parents are gonna buy in, but I think ultimately, when you have those moments throughout the season to be able to speak to the parents, I think that's an opportunity for you to say, here's how you can help us help your kid, right? And then you're planting the seed about the psychological readiness and all the things you're gonna be planting the seeds with the athletes for, but the parents are in the know, and if you expand by talking about, well, we're gonna help them physically, we're gonna help them with hockey, we're gonna help them do these things, but our approach overall is the entire athlete, right? And here's how you can help us do that. So giving them some vocabulary, right, as you're touching them at various moments is one really good seed plan, I think, that you can really, get parents to be involved in some capacity. Some will buy in, some won't, but at least that you're telling them, right?
And I'll jump in and say, I'm a family doctor, and you may not realize it when you go to see your doctor, but 90% of what your doctor is doing is trying to get you to change your behavior about something that you'd rather not change your behavior about. And so when we are trying to get someone else, an adult, to think about something differently, we can't do it for our reasons. We could only maybe succeed if it's for their reasons. I'm gonna assume from something you said that one of the things that the parents who are most resistant are thinking is like, I'm just here, right, a word just. I'm just here for my kid to be kept active or for my kid to learn how to win at hockey. I'm not here for you to holistically change my child. I am here because I want my kid to know how to, whale on the ice or whatever it is. If you could maybe get the coaches to give you some language about how this work helps these athletes be more athletically successful, that would give you language to turn back to the parent with when they push back. But basically what I'm saying is, you have to know the parents' why that they're there. So if for these 600 athletes, you could add one question to the registration form, which is why do you want your child to be involved in this sport? Yeah. You'll be able to use their why to help them see how you're getting that kid closer to the parents' why, not closer to your agenda. Although it is closer to your agenda, but that's not what I'm asking you to focus on. Okay.
And I would follow up with that as well. Something that struck me in your intro of your program, your description, is you said you have 3 generational buy-in communities. So this community is all in, invested across time and space. So lean into that social capital that exists. So can you have a former player that's climbed the ranks come back and speak about, or even write out a testimonial about the value
Make a
of
quick
that?
video on their phone.
Yeah, because that's what I hear a lot from my student athletes is I can talk all day long and they're like, blah, blah, professor, blah, blah. And then, but like, Jeff Kelly comes in and he just graduated from men's basketball and they are all ears. And so someone that's come through that program or holds value and respect in the community to speak to the value of it, or how that, if they would have had that through that program, how it would have changed their trajectory, something like that.
Okay, there's somebody else over here. Yes.
Yes, I'm a teacher and educator as well as a coach. And one of the things that we started implementing after training sessions and games is what we call well next transition. And the idea is that you have to think about one thing you did well, can you relive it in hopes that we build confidence? Next, like what is your goal for next session? You did some things well, you did some things that you'd like to improve on. What are you gonna improve on next session? And hopefully develop a growth mindset. And then the last part is transition. What are you gonna do in a different role of your life, right? If you're gonna be a good son, if you're gonna be a good boyfriend, if you're gonna be a good friend, what's one action that you are going to do in order to build that identity that we've talked about that has come up again. And I was curious to get your thoughts, like where would you see us adding something? So if it's well next transition, and what do you think would be a good component to add at the end?
Again, I'm partial, but it's for a good reason. How about,
Wait, let me guess.
what am I gonna say, Dr. G?
Emotion.
What emotions did you experience? And how can you respond adaptively to that? Or use whatever language you want, but the key is label the emotion. What emotions did you experience in that process? How can you respond differently next time? Like, I think that opens up the door, right, to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, we try to do that like in the pre-session where we talk, I guess Mark Brackett's work with the chart, the mood meter. So building the emotions in at the beginning, but yeah, I hear you saying at the end as well. Thank you.
I would suggest that maybe you get them thinking a little bit beyond, because one of the things I really heard from the athletes today is that it's hard at every stage of being all in with your sport to picture beyond that in any way, like to picture beyond high school or beyond competition in that. I wanted to say that this morning we were talking a lot about how athleticism is only a part of your life. I think athleticism and interest and involvement in sport can be your whole life, but elite competition is not your whole life, meaning in the lifespan of your life. So if you could maybe ask them about a hope for the future, or if you're gonna go beyond the transition that's today, what's something you're gonna pick up this weekend after our game, that's your transition piece is, and what's something you're doing now to get whatever's over the horizon a little bit closer.
And my ad would be in that differentiation space. What's a non-sport success you've had today or this week, and what's a non-sport challenge you've had, today or this week? The other things that weigh on them that are around that space. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We have somebody over here, yeah?
Everyone, my name's Leslie Irvine. I serve as the Vice President Director of Athletics at Colorado College, and thank you for this space at this critical time. Our college has recently elevated mental wellness of students to be a top strategic priority, and we are engaging actively with our student athletes in a very collaborative way. I love that we're focusing on practical takeaways. Thank you. One of the things we're actively discussing is the idea of being able to take a mental health day. And for a student athlete to say, I'd like to take a mental health day, I don't really want to talk about that anymore, and I also don't want there to be any repercussions. Can you talk to me about how we generate buy-in, think about that, talk to the coaches about that, talk to our student athletes? Thank you again.
Yeah, this is something that's come up on our campus a lot this year as we're in that same process of working in that peer leadership model. And some coaches have asked me. So it's a little more predominant in some sports than others currently in college sports, and some are doing like a no questions asked day. So some are calling it a mental health day, some are calling it a no questions asked day. And the coach asked me, what's your thought on that? What's the value? And I said, there's a lot of value, but just like Dr. Chapman's been saying, like also normalizing the culture and conversation around it. And so one of the questions was, well, how do you utilize that where it's not just, so I teach a lot of things on motivation, right? And so one type of motivation is avoidance motivation. So one of the coach's questions was, how do we not just make this like a temporary escape hatch without really helping the student? You know, they're taking a rest, but are they just also running away from what's really overwhelming them? And so one idea with that was having them send the coach something that they're doing for their wellness on their day that they choose. So like just sending them a video, a note of something that they've chosen that's really gonna fill up their cup. And that also like keeps that conversation going. But then making sure that across your entire coaching staff that they are really valuing that, so that the athletes have not even a tiny shadow of a doubt that even if they take that mental health day and it's allowed, that they'll still be viewed as a liability or have some type of repercussion that comes from it.
That's a brilliant answer. This is a conversation that's happening in your state legislatures across the country. There are 24 states, when I was interviewed about this over the summer, that were considering mandating mental health days in their states. Like Illinois did this. They passed a law saying students get 5 mental health days. And so this is a conversation happening in a lot of places, and a lot of the parent pushback was, well, how am I supposed to know if a kid's taking advantage of it? And I was like, well, hang on, this happens with physical illness too. I know not a lot of people are using mercury thermometers anymore, but raise your hand if you know how to make it look like you have a temperature, and that the only damage is running it up too high, so when you stick it back under your tongue, when your mom comes in the room, you're like, ow, 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 oh, look, I'm sick. So when we have conversations with students about how they're doing and what they need, our goal is to get to a place where we believe them.
Yeah.
And where they really are motivated to tell us what's true for them because they feel like they're gonna be met in that place with support. And so that idea of saying, I hear what you're not gonna do, and I honor that. I want to know what you're going to do, because just not doing isn't enough. What are you actually gonna do? Which isn't go get me a doctor's note and prove your suffering. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, great, that's one step, but it's not enough. We do in this, our culture is that we do to make we proactively make ourselves healthier. Yeah. So that sounds to me like a fantastic way to approach it.
I agree.
Yeah. Do we have more microphones out there?
Yeah, we had a question online. What is the best language to use with athlete departments as it relates to mental wellness programs for their athletes?
So this is a conversation with leadership, and the implication is that leadership is maybe a little bit hesitant. Is that a nice way to put that? A little bit hesitant to see the value in this. And I'm interested in your thoughts, especially Dr. Kirby, and also if anybody here feels like they want to battle in that way and you have some suggestions, we'd love to hear.
Was the question, is the language?
What language can you use to help the leadership in an athletic department, or even maybe the leadership at a school, see the value in mental wellness for athletes?
Yeah, I think something I've used and something I've started to see rapidly across sport is this use of the term mental wellness, right? And I've seen sport organizations and administrative staffs, they're very leery of using the terms mental health because they're concerned about like the clinical liability when you get into the diagnosis space, and letting them know that mental health and mental wellness mean the exact same thing. We just haven't made it mean the same thing in our conversations. Is this spectrum of possibility, right? And we have this really cool opportunity to build mental strength in our young people that's not only gonna help them be successful in sport, but also in school and life, and that they can't perform if they're not well to start with, right? So if we really wanna optimize their performance, then we have to help them build these skills where they can even begin to tap into optimizing their achievement potential. And so that's some of the terms that I think have been well received.
/ using data to support it.
Yeah.
So having just a very brief blurb about studies indicate X, Y, and Z about student athletes, right? When they're performing well, right, they're healthy, they're having emotional regulation, they're eating better, they have more optimism, and all the statistics that we know, I think that administrators certainly would, speak to that. So I think that having the language is one thing, but having the data to support it would be something else to back that up too.
/ looking at why that administrator wants a sports program in the first place and showing how mental wellness in the athletes gets you closer to whatever that is, whether it's winning or people showing up to watch because the games are more fun and more, whatever it is.
Yep.
Before we end, which we are about to do, in a minute, but not yet, I'm going to ask each of you to say one of the most impactful solutions you heard today in our whole day. And I'd like to encourage everybody who's here to give yourself this homework. Don't turn off your computer from this event or walk out the door before you've written down one thing you'd like to take action on in your setting, in your role. That's how we make this work scale up. Okay, Dr. Chapman.
I'd say something Dr. Candace said that's very simple. Again, this doesn't have to be complicated, right? But something very simple that I thought was really powerful is treating the brain like a muscle.
Yep.
I mean, think about what we do with our muscles, right? We fuel them, we feed them, we stretch them, we do all these things. And treating our brain that way, because again, what we're finding from this summit, I hope, is that student athlete mental health and wellness is all about the mental part is even more important than the physical at this stage. The statistics support that. So I think it's so incredibly important that we recognize that that stigma will decrease the more of us surrounding this issue and agree that the brain is a muscle and it's something that has to be, utilized that way and not thought of some separate entity that we don't have to deal with. That's so incredibly important. I thought that was powerful.
I think my takeaway to share would be to build, right? And so to build proactively, to build up our athletes, to build up our coaches, our teams, our sport culture, and our infrastructure based in this core principle of just our shared common humanity, which is something I was talking with Dr. Camo about over the coffee break, right? And so just big bear hug around the idea that we have both a responsibility and the opportunity to create a positive impact on the lives of young people, which is so exciting to me, like goosebumpy exciting, right? And it's a privilege and a power to get to walk along with someone, alongside them on their journey and have an impact on another human being. Like, that is the coolest gift we get in the entire world. Even if we're a volunteer, it's still a gift to be a part of someone else's journey and just squeezing that wholeheartedly in all that we do.
This has been an incredible conversation, and I mentioned to you really early in the day that resilience is the ability to navigate change with intention and purpose. Every panel, so many of you have talked about purpose, have talked about the why and the mission. And so I want to echo and amplify that idea that whenever we get to a point where we're not sure how to make a necessary step, or which things should we choose that we're going to focus on in this practice, or this ride home with an athlete, or this policy we get to create, keep going back to the mission and center the athlete in that mission. Thank you so much for your time and your attention today.
Thank you for a wonderful solutions panel. I feel so empowered. I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I have tools now, tangible things that I can take away from this and engage in my community and help, equip the next generation to be young men and women of integrity and walk in what Travis Tiger has done so beautifully as far as building an organization that promotes integrity and promotes the growth of integrity, which I think, once again, a very rare thing that he's trying to make common. So I just want to say thank you for your vision. Thank you for putting all this together, Travis. I know I'm probably making you blush right now. This is not something that you necessarily enjoy, but we are thankful for you and for Jen and her team and Lisa. I think she stepped out, and Betsy, Audrey, Lisa's there, Betsy, Audrey, the whole team. Thank you so much. Our wonderful panelists who took the time to share what they've gleaned over decades of experience and study. Thank you. The moderators, you did a wonderful job drawing out that insight from them. And all of you, because you're the ones who are going out there to be evangelists in a sense for us, right? To go out there and change the lives of young boys and girls so they can go on to do great things like our panelists. So thank you all for being here. We can't thank you enough. And I think Jen is going to wrap up with some final statements, and then we'll be off.
Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you to our final panel. You guys were amazing as always. We have come to the end of, I know, a very robust and full day. There's a lot of information, a lot to digest, a lot to take back and do great things with. Thank you for sitting through it with us. Thank you for participating, for engaging around this important topic. A couple of last minute logistics. So for those of you who are both here today and those who are watching online, we will be sharing the recordings from these sessions. It'll probably take us a couple of weeks, so be patient, but we will send those out via email. You are welcome to share those as broadly as possible. We want this spread as far as you can possibly spread it. So feel free to share those videos once they're in your hands. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that TrueSport and USADA are committed to continuing this work, continuing the conversation. There are two things we're doing as a follow-up to this event. The first is our Cohort for Change. We have invited and have brought in about 10 coaches from around the country who are committed to this work, who are going to spend the next year in partnership with TrueSport around these topics. We are having a training for them following this. We're going to spend time. We're going to come back. We're going to collect data. We're going to do great things with that particular group. So thank you for those of you who are in the group today who are going to be our initial Cohort for Change. Thank you. We know you'll do great things. The second piece is that we're pulling together an academic advisory group. They have been in attendance in the last couple of days. They've been doing lit reviews, they've been doing pre-work, they've been doing focus groups. They're also going to spend the entire day tomorrow drafting a recommendations report. So look for that to come out. We hope that it'll come out with practical, pragmatic, actionable things that you can take back to your communities and begin to incorporate as best practice. So we're committed to continuing this work. We hope you'll walk along with us. Thank you again. You've been amazing. We hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.